The Grand Conclave Hall of the Galactic Federation was a monument to cold, serene power. It was not built of stone or metal, but of shaped light and gravitational fields, a perfect silent sphere hanging in the void between stars. Here, the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy gathered to dictate the fate of others. The air, what little of it was needed for the few oxygen breathers present, hummed with the subharmonics of absolute authority. The nine thrall, their crystalline forms refracting the chamber's soft luminescence, communicated through pulses of structured light. The venerators of the silent song, gaseous entities contained within shimmering fields, made their thoughts known as pressure waves that resonated in the mind. The Kthar, reptilian and severe, spoke with sibilant hisses. They were the architects of order, the weavers of destiny. And today, their destiny was humanity. The charge was not one of malice, or conquest, or even trespass. It was far more damning. The species self-designated as humanity from the Sol system, the lead nine-thrall emissary, Illumina, began, its voice a chorus of chiming crystals, has been assessed. Their profile is one of profound and irreversible chaos. They are a statistical anomaly of unpredictability. They war amongst themselves for abstract concepts. They form irrational attachments to individuals, sacrificing the logical for the emotional. Their technological growth is not a smooth curve, but a series of violent, uncontrolled explosions. They are a threat to the precursor mandate of harmonious existence. A holographic representation of Earth bloomed in the center of the sphere. It showed human history in a rapid, brutal montage: the rise and fall of empires, the blaze of wars, the stunning breakthroughs in art and science born from the same minds that conceived terrible weapons. They are a splinter in the smooth flesh of the galaxy, hissed the Kthar ambassador Vorlak. A fever that must be broken before it spreads. Their very nature is a contagion of instability. There was no malice in their words. Only a cold, sterile conclusion. It was the same tone a surgeon would use to diagnose a necrotic limb. The decision was not born of hatred, but of a logic so vast and impersonal it was indistinguishable from cruelty. The vote was called. It was unanimous. The eradication of the human species was not to be an invasion. It was to be a sterilization. The Stellar Tapestry Armada, a fleet of planet-rending vessels that had millennia ago scoured the galaxy of other anomalies, was dispatched. Their orders were simple: approach the Sol system, deploy the gravimetric annihilator, and reduce the Earth, its colonies, and all its history to subatomic dust. A clean, clinical, and final procedure. As the Armada slipped into the void, the Conclave turned its attention to other matters. The human problem was, for all intents and purposes, already solved. They had voted for silence, and they expected to receive it. They had no idea that Earth was about to cast its own, very different vote. 130 to 1500 hours, rising conflict, the logic of extinction. The Stellar Tapestry Armada was a sight to inspire awe and terror. It was not a fleet of jagged, aggressive warships. It was a serene geometric constellation of vessels, their hulls polished to a mirror finish, moving with a silent inexorable grace of natural law. They did not broadcast threats or declarations of war. To them, this was not war. War implied a conflict between peers. This was pest control on a planetary scale. Aboard the command ship, the Absolute Clarity, Armada Director Kalen of the Nine Thrall observed the approaching Sol system. His crystalline form was interfaced directly with the ship's sensorium, drinking in the data streams. The third planet confirms initial assessments, he stated, his chiming voice echoing in the minds of his subordinate AIs. High-energy signatures. Erratic orbital traffic. A cacophony of uncontrolled transmissions. The chaos is systemic. His second, a logical construct of pure light, pulsed. The gravimetric annihilator is primed. Firing solution is optimal. We will initiate the collapse of the planetary core in precisely one solar rotation of the target world. There will be no debris. Only a brief, bright echo of mass converted to energy. On Earth, the first signs were not of panic, but of a strange unified confusion. The world's disparate governments, corporations, and factions had spent centuries in a state of managed conflict and tense cooperation. But the arrival of the Armada, a silent, unmoving fleet that appeared at the edge of the solar system and did nothing but observe, was a puzzle that transcended all their petty squabbles. Attempts at communication were made. Radio waves, laser pulses, complex mathematical greetings. The Armada acknowledged none of it. To the Conclave's logic, there was nothing to discuss. The verdict had been passed. The sentence was being carried out. Speaking to the condemned was illogical. This silence was the first mistake the Conclave made. They misunderstood human psychology. A threat, a demand, an ultimatum. These were things humanity knew how to process. This silent, judgmental observation was something far more terrifying. It was the silence of a pathologist staring at a slide under a microscope. Dr. Eris Thorne, the head of the newly formed Extrasolar Threat Analysis Group, stood in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, staring at a hologram of the Armada. Around her were the best and most frantic minds on the planet: generals, diplomats, physicists, and historians. "They're not talking," the Russian liaison growled. "They are just waiting." "It's not a blockade," a Japanese astrophysicist added, her voice tight. "Their formation is all wrong for that. It's ceremonial. They are positioned like priests around an altar." Eris, a woman whose face was a roadmap of sleepless nights and relentless pressure, zoomed in on the central vessel. "And that one? The big one. The energy readings are off the scale. It's not a weapon we recognize. The physics of it, it's like it's generating a localized singularity. But it's stable. Impossibly stable." "A planet killer," the American general, Markov, stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "Something worse," Eris whispered. "Something clean. They're not here to conquer. They're here to tidy up. To erase." The world held its breath. For 72 hours, a fragile global truce held as every channel of human ingenuity was focused on one question: what do they want? Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A linguistics prodigy named Ben Carter, working out of a university in Nairobi, had been analyzing the minuscule energy fluctuations of the Armada's passive sensors. He wasn't looking for language. He was looking for patterns. "They're not ignoring us," he said, his voice trembling with a terrifying epiphany over a global secure channel. "They're scanning us. They're downloading our entire datasphere. Every book, every broadcast, every bite of our history. They're building a case." "A case for what?" General Markov barked. "For this." Ben shouted, pulling up a complex data model. "It's a verdict. They've already tried us. In their minds, the trial is over. The scanning, it's the final audit. They're confirming their judgment." The revelation was a psychic shockwave. The silence wasn't indifference. It was the silence of a judge who has already passed the death sentence. The human reaction was not one of unified despair, but of 1,000 different, chaotic responses. Some nations pleaded. Some launched futile symbolic missile barrages that were effortlessly disintegrated light minutes from their targets. Others fell into hedonistic anarchy. But in the chaos, a single coherent voice began to emerge. It wasn't the voice of a president or a general. It was the collective voice of human defiance, channeled through Eris Thorne. She stood before the fractured World Council, her face pale but her eyes blazing. "They think we are chaos. They think our emotions, our conflicts, our irrationality are a flaw, a disease. They are going to wipe us out because we don't fit their perfect, sterile model of existence." She slammed her hand on the podium. "So let's show them just how chaotic we can be. They have cast their vote. It's time for Earth to vote back." 1500 hours 40:00, human response, the impossible vote. What followed was not the mobilization of a traditional army. It was the mobilization of an entire species' spirit. Eris's speech, "The Earth votes back," became a rallying cry that bypassed governments and spoke directly to the human soul. The conclave, observing from afar, saw only more chaos. They saw the frantic, illogical scrambling. They saw what appeared to be a species in its death throes. They did not see the pattern beneath the chaos. They did not understand that humanity, when cornered, does not have a single unified plan. It has a million competing, contradictory, and brilliant plans, all executed at once. The conclave's logic was predicated on predictable responses. Humanity's strength was its glorious, terrifying unpredictability. Project Icarus, led by a consortium of private aerospace companies and a renegade group of orbital engineers, it was the most audacious infrastructure project in history. Their plan was not to build a fleet to fight the Armada, That was impossible. Their plan was to turn the entire inner solar system into a weapon. Using every available ship, tug, and construction drone, they began deploying millions of reflective solar sails, positioning them at the Lagrange points between the Sun and the Armada's position. To the aliens, it looked like a desperate attempt to create a shield. It was, in fact, the barrel of a gun. The Cassandra Code, a global team of hackers, coders, and theoretical psychologists, working out of basements and server farms, devised a weapon of a different kind. They analyzed the Conclave's logic, their cold, sterile communication. They realized their AIs and even their organic minds operated on a foundation of pure, flawless reason. So they built a digital plague, a virus not of corruption, but of paradox. A logical nightmare made of Gödel's incompleteness theorem and unresolvable philosophical quandaries. It was a weapon designed not to crash their systems, but to give their perfect logic a nervous breakdown. The Ghost Fleet, while the world focused on the Armada at the system's edge, a separate clandestine operation was underway. Using experimental quantum slipstream drives, technology deemed too unstable and dangerous for widespread use, a volunteer force of pilots took a handful of old, decommissioned warships and mining vessels on a one-way trip. Their trajectory was not towards the Armada, but away from it, using the Sun's gravity as a slingshot to catapult them on a desperate long-shot journey. Their target was not the fleet, but the source. The Conclave itself. The Armada director, Kalen, watched these developments with detached curiosity. The target species is engaging in frenetic high-energy activity, he reported to the Conclave. They are constructing a primitive reflective barrier. They are attempting to broadcast incoherent data packets. They are launching a small number of vessels on escape trajectories. All activities are consistent with a terminal panic response. They are trying everything, with no coherent strategy. It is noisy. The Conclave was satisfied. The human response was confirming every negative assessment they had made. The chaos was simply burning itself out. They had no concept of a Hail Mary. No framework for the kind of hope that thrives only when all hope is lost. The moment of execution arrived. The gravimetric annihilator on the Absolute Clarity began its final activation sequence. A low hum, felt not as sound but as a twisting of space-time itself, emanated from the ship. On Earth, Eris Thorne stood in her command center, her finger hovering over a single unmarked button. The solar sail array was in position. The Cassandra Code was loaded and ready to be piggybacked on every frequency humanity possessed. The Ghost Fleet was already gone, lost in the void. "They're powering the weapon," a technician screamed. "Now," Eris said, her voice quiet but absolute. She pressed the button. On the bridge of the Absolute Clarity, alarms that had never been designed to sound began to shriek. The serene view of the starfield twisted and warped. Director. Anomaly. The light construct second pulsed, its light flickering erratically. The stellar output of the system's primary has increased by 400%. It is focused. The millions of solar sails of Project Icarus had not been a shield. They were a lens. A lens the size of a planetary orbit. Humanity had not tried to block the Armada's weapon. They had built a bigger one. They had turned the Sun itself into a blowtorch. A beam of coherent stellar plasma, concentrated and focused by the vast solar sail array, slammed into the stellar tapestry Armada. It was not a laser, it was a river of raw star stuff, a biblical flood of incandescent fury. The perfect, mirror-polished hulls of the Conclave ships did not reflect it. They vaporized. The geometric formation dissolved into a swirling chaos of superheated gas and molten metal. The Absolute Clarity shuddered, its shields overloading in milliseconds. Kalen felt a sensation he had never experienced: shock. It was an illogical, impossible input. And then the Cassandra Code hit. The data stream, broadcast on every conceivable frequency, was not a virus in the traditional sense. It was a cognitive weapon. To the AIs and the logically structured minds of the Conclave, it was pure poison. It was the sound of one hand clapping. It was the statement this sentence is false. It was the image of an impossible cube, forever turning in on itself. Their perfect systems, built on flawless binary and crystalline logic, seized. They tried to process the paradoxes, to resolve the unresolvable, and in doing so, they began to consume their own processing cycles in an infinite, suicidal loop. Ships that had survived the solar flare began to drift, their crews incapacitated by a weapon that attacked not their bodies, but their very mode of thought. The Kthar shrieked, their linear minds shattered by the paradox. The nine thrall flickered and dimmed, their crystalline logic fracturing. Kalen, struggling to maintain coherence, saw the final act of human defiance on his sensors. The Ghost Fleet, the handful of old battered ships everyone had assumed were fleeing, dropped out of their quantum slipstream not at the edge of the system, but right in the heart of the Conclave's home territory. They did not fire a single shot. Their ships, pushed far beyond their limits by the desperate journey, were already breaking apart. But before they did, they opened their cargo bays. And from those bays, they deployed not warheads, but monuments. Carved stone pillars, like modern-day Rosetta Stones, etched with the entirety of human knowledge, our science, our art, our music, our history of both glorious triumphs and shameful failures. Seed banks containing the DNA of every species on Earth. Hard copies of our greatest stories. A time capsule of a species that refused to be forgotten. The Ghost Fleet's last transmission echoed across the Conclave's homeworlds, a simple message from its doomed commander: you voted to erase us. We vote to be remembered. We cast our ballot not in weapons, but in who we are. The record of humanity is now part of your world. You can try to bury it, but you cannot unlearn it. Then, the ships silently broke apart, their crews dying in the void, their mission complete. Silence returned to the Grand Conclave Hall. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was not the silence of power, but the silence of profound, universe-shattering shock. The holographic display showed the aftermath. The once proud stellar tapestry armada was a cloud of expanding debris. The home systems were now littered with the artifacts of a species they had deemed insignificant. Ambassador Vorlak of the Kthar was the first to speak, his hiss now subdued. They did not fight our fleet. They fought our idea. Illumina of the Nine Thrall pulsed, its light patterns slow and confused. Their strategy was not a strategy. It was a symphony of chaos. A million disparate actions, all dissonant, that created a chord of impossible victory. Our logic could not account for it. We saw noise where there was pattern. They had witnessed a species that could, in one moment, be tearing itself apart, and in the next, unite to turn its son into a weapon. A species that could send its sons and daughters to certain death not for conquest, but to deliver a message. A species whose greatest weapon was not its technology, but its indomitable, irrational, and beautiful will. They had tried to erase a flaw in the galaxy's design, and in response, that flaw had reached out and rewritten the rules of the design itself. The Conclave had voted for silence, and Earth, with fire, paradox, and stone, had voted back. The war was over. There were no negotiations, no treaties. The Conclave simply withdrew. They left humanity alone, not out of fear of our weapons, but out of a terrified awe of our nature. They had looked into the heart of chaos and found not a void, but a roaring, unstoppable fire. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.